What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Michael here and welcome to FudgeMuppet. Today I'm here to bring you our latest Skyrim Remastered build, the Orc Noble. Also, I'm excited to let the Fallout fans among you know that we have a Fallout build coming this week, which actually takes advantage of a special, highly aesthetic power armor mod. To many, the Orc Noble is a complete contradiction at first sight. People may dismiss him as a brute, but in reality the Orc Noble is an honorable warrior, trained by a renowned knight of Breton nobility. But don't think that just because he is well raised and noble that he isn't perfectly capable of dealing with anyone who wishes him harm. He's still an orc by birth, and he can get very violent if he really needs to. The Orc Noble grew up despised by everyone around him. He is the perfect example of good manners and a pure heart, but to some he will never be anything more than a savage, deserving of a bolt between the eyes. The Orc Noble combines all the best features of an orc tribesman and a Breton knight. He can fight with immeasurable ferocity one moment, and then with the reliable composure and grace of a knight blessed by the divines the next. Other times, his smooth talk and forgiving nature can keep even the most desperate bandit in good spirits. There are plenty of options for every scenario with the Orc Noble, but this character's end goal revolves around political influence and the admiration and respect of the people of Skyrim. What better way to honor his father? Before we get started, don't forget that timestamps can be found below in the description for all of your video navigation needs. But with that said, let's jump right into the Orc Noble's race, standing stone, and stats. The Orc Noble is an Imperial. Just kidding, as the name suggests, he's actually an orc. As an orc, he will begin the game with a boost of +5 to one-handed, block, and smithing. He'll also have an innate ability called Berserker Rage. With it, he'll take half damage and do double damage for 60 seconds once per day. Now, unlike many other racial powers, this one remains useful into the end game stages. As for a standing stone, take the Warrior Stone early on to level your essential skills, then change to the Atronach Stone for some seriously valuable protection against magic using opponents. The Lord Stone is a fitting replacement too, though. It isn't quite as useful and offers 50 armor rating and 25% magic resistance instead of the Atronach's 50% spell absorption, but the Lord Stone is more royal and, in my opinion, nicer for role-playing purposes. You can pick either of these as your endgame stone. The Orc Noble stat spread will be 70% health to stay alive and 30% stamina for lots of shield charging, shield bashing, and power attacking, both with our dual-wielding playstyle and our mace and shield style. Now let's explore the backstory so we can get a good insight into who this Orc Noble really is. What makes him so different? Well, in the year 181 of the 4th era, a small tribe of orcs lived a simple life, hidden somewhere up in the mountains to the south of Shornhelm. This tribe of orcs lived very much like all orcs in the area, choosing to raid and plunder rather than to cultivate crops and hunt game themselves. Shockingly, the orcish reputation in the surrounding Breton land was not stellar, and it was hard to blame the locals for their prejudice towards the green-skinned brutes. Nevertheless, the tribe of orcs provided for their kin by scaring local Bretons from their homes or killing the ones who refused to flee. Male and female orcs alike charged together with their hammers and maces raised high, and at the end of each raid there would always be a freshly caught fish or a recently skinned elk to take back to the camp. The Bretons were an industrious bunch, and the orc savages appreciated that, for if they weren't so good at using the land, maybe the orcs would need to learn to hunt and gather themselves. A lot further to the north, in the city of Shornhelm, a Breton man named Roberto Windvale attended court to hear from the messengers. Every week, emissaries from across the region of Rivenspire, of which the kingdom of Shornhelm was a part of, would wait to meet representatives of the various great houses which helped govern the land. Windvale had earned his place among the nobility, partly due to his innate magical talents, but also due to his skill with a sword and a shield. He was a high-ranking knight and was often sent on quests on behalf of Rivenspire and for the glory of Shornhelm, and so Windvale waited patiently for the messengers to speak. Apparently, local settlers, who provided high quantities of grain and fish for places in Rivenspire, were being plagued by orc pillagers. The leaders of the noble houses of Rivenspire convened and eventually decided to send a party of knights to rid the settlement of their plight. Roberto Windvale was chosen to lead the party, and upon hearing the royal decree, his heart was filled with anticipation and glory. He stood and bowed before the court, and then chose which companions would accompany him on his quest. The village was 3 days' ride south of Shornhelm, and despite the rows of freshly caught and gutted fish, the inhabitants looked gaunt and hungry. When the knights rode into town, spirits were soon lifted. Now, in order to catch the orc raiders unaware, Windvale ordered his men to hide in the houses of the villagers. Roberto sat patiently in the house of a fisherman. His wife and his young twin boys sat by the fireplace across from him. Roberto watched the boys quietly playing with their toys fondly. Back in Shornhelm, he and his wife had tried and tried for a child, but no amount of effort had worked. They'd tried herbal teas, making love under the new moon, fortune and every wives' tale in the book, but despite his success as a noble knight, he was a failure in that regard, and all of his attempts had been frivolous. His introspection was cut short by savage cries from the south, a raid. The unmistakable growl of charging orcs. He spoke a few soothing words to the fisherman and his wife. He knelt down and removed a gauntlet to rustle the fair hair on the heads of the two boys, and then he prepared for a fight. The orcs had expected another easy victory. The locals weren't fit to fend off raiders, but Windvale and his men, garbed in shining steel plate, knew exactly how to deal with savages. The fight was over as quickly as it had begun, and not a single Breton had been lost, neither from the village or his party of knights. The orcs had been taken by surprise. Just as he went to wipe his brow with his silk kerchief, he saw a green-skinned warrior fleeing south into the foothills. Windvale gave chase. He followed the orc all the way back to his camp, and when he caught up, the orc was trapped. There was a fireplace in the center of the camp, and several fur tents huddled around it. The orc had nowhere to run, and Windvale removed his head. As he turned to leave the abandoned camp, he heard crying. It came from the center tent. He opened the flap, and lying on the bedroll, wrapped in furs, was a baby orc. It was at this moment his men caught up to him. They expected him to give the boy a quick death, but he couldn't muster the courage. The infant orc hadn't raided any villages. In fact, at such a young age, before his tusks had grown in, he kind of resembled a human child. Roberto picked up the child and carried him home to Shornhelm. The orc noble was raised much like any Breton noble, with a loving family and an honorable father, although no matter how polite and well-mannered he was taught to be, the other children disliked him, and the Windvale family was questioned a lot as a result of Roberto's choice to raise the so-called brute. As he grew older, the orc noble realized the reality of his birth and the sacrifices his father had made to give him a good life, yet his father had never once shown weakness. In a Breton culture where nothing meant more than status, the formerly glorified knight was now considered the town eccentric and was rarely invited to court events, all because of the orc noble. He felt guilt for that, but his father persisted in teaching him manners, to read and write, and importantly how to swing a sword. The master at arms had refused to give the orc noble a sword, lest he use it to go on a murderous rampage, but Roberto Windvale had given him a stern talking to, reminding him of the countless times he had saved his skin in battle. The orc noble soon had a polished steel sword in his hands, and it proved to be a good thing, as even though he was an outcast in the Shornhelm court, the orc noble excelled with the sword. Eventually, when he was old enough, the orc noble knew he wouldn't be able to gain much political influence in Shornhelm and High Rock, for the Breton people did not want orcish nobility. He was sick of only being tolerated for his name, and he was sick of dirtying his father's previously impeccable reputation, so he decided to head somewhere else. The orc noble decided on Skyrim, where he would carve his own political path, making the most of the turmoil in the province at the time. There would be plenty of people to help, and lots of deeds to carry out. Unfortunately, he was caught on the border of Skyrim, and no amount of assurances that he was noble born were enough to free him of his fate. The arrival of the dragons, however, was enough to save him from his grisly doom, and the orc noble saw this as a sign. It was meant to be, and when he discovers he is dragonborn, he will know the reason why. No matter how poorly the orc noble is treated, whether it be a cruel insult or an imperial wanting to chop off his head, this character will always be polite, kind-hearted, and accepting of others, for his father would accept no less of his only son. And when the battlefield cakes him in dirt, the orc noble will maintain a clean appearance in the cities, bathing frequently in the rivers of Skyrim when a bathtub isn't available. He will be out to help others, largely due to the kindness of his heart, but also to gain positive influence in Skyrim. He may not look much like a Breton, but like his father, he sees value in carrying out quests to improve his social standing. He will especially help the disadvantaged, and will always give to beggars. He will aim to become the Thane of as many holds as possible, and will not take a side in the war early on, instead hoping to be a diplomat, attending the peace meeting with the Greybeards, Ulfric Stormcloak, and General Tullius. Lastly, he will see the return of the dragons and his dragonborn powers as a huge bonus and great publicity. With them, he can massively benefit the people of Skyrim and add to his influence in the land. As for factions, he will of course follow the main storyline and the Dragonborn DLC for the reason I just stated. He will join the companions to show off his might and mental fortitude, although he will choose to cure the werewolf form to be as pure as possible, for he is not a savage like the biological family he never knew. He will join the Dawnguard for the positive impact it will have on Skyrim and his reputation, and as I said before, he will heavily involve himself in politics, trying to become Thane of every city regardless of their affiliation with the Empire or the Stormcloaks. He will undertake any quest that serves a noble cause, or involves helping good people, especially those incapable of helping themselves. In the Civil War, he will try to remain neutral, but after the main storyline, you can choose to side side with the Imperials if you wish. The main skills for this build will be one-handed, block, light armor, smithing, and a new addition, speech. The Orc Noble does not have the same affinity for magic that many Bretons do, and he will not be using any spells, but with his Dragonborn powers he will want to use shouts. Shouts to use include Unrelenting Force, Fire Breath, and Dragon Aspect. If he wants to appear influential and worth getting behind to the people of Skyrim, what better way to achieve that than by showing off his thumb? With the ethereal glowing gold and red horns and scales of a dragon, Dragon Aspect will make the Orc Noble look like a king to the common folk. But with his shouts out of the way, let's get into his essential perks, starting with one-handed. Whatever prejudices men, mer, and beasts alike may have towards the orcs, no mortal would question their ability to fight like merciless warriors. Similarly, many people know that there are few cultures outside of High Rock that teach such chivalrous gallantry with sword, shield, and light armor. The Orc Noble has had his feet in both of these camps, combining an orc's natural ferocity with a Breton's refined composure and grace on the battlefield. From the one-handed skill tree, take the middle branch up to and including both Savage Strike and Critical Charge. Then take the right-hand branch. Having an investment in both of these branches will give the Orc Noble some options in combat. He can be effective with one weapon in his right hand while holding a shield in the other, or he can go fully on the offensive, dual-wielding a dagger and sword for speed, or a sword and a mace for more damage. With a one-handed weapon in his right gauntlet and a shield in the other, the Orc Noble is covered in terms of both offense and defense, and take it from an orc to figure out exactly how to be deadly with a shield. The Orc Noble can break free from his defensive stance to bash and charge his way through the opponent's line. From the block skill tree, go for absolutely everything. With the 3 bash perks, a whack with your shield can do a ton of damage and even disarm opponents, while shield charge gives you the option to send everyone in your way flying. In Shornhelm, the Master-at-Arms didn't trust an orc in the city walls garbed in impenetrable heavy steel armor. Instead, he was only ever given light leather armor. That way, should the rabid dog of an orc ever go wild on the innocent Breton nobles, they could simply puncture him with crossbow bolts like a green and red pincushion. As you'd expect, that didn't stop the Orc Noble, and he adapted easily. From the light armor skill tree, take the left branch around to Unhindered. Pretty standard fare here. Unhindered will remove carry weight from your light armor, and you'll move faster while only wearing light armor. Orcs are natural smiths, with an affinity for creating the most effective arms and armor, and like a true noble of sophisticated taste, this orc can turn to a humble trade when it is required of him. From the smithing skill tree, follow the left branch around to dragon smithing, and then the right hand branch around to ebony smithing. This will allow you to forge and improve all of your gear, as well as allow you to forge plenty of gear for trading. Lastly, we have a new addition to the build. You wouldn't associate an orc with dulcet tones and a silver tongue, but growing up around the courts of High Rock, where words were just as powerful as blades, the Orc Noble boasts quite an ability for persuasion and bartering. From the speech skill tree, take the full left-hand branch for much more fruitful interactions with merchants across Skyrim. And so, with all of these skills, shouts, and perks outlined, we can get into how it will come together in-game. When you enter combat, you'll have some options. You can go for aggression, wielding a dagger in your left hand and a sword in your right for speedy dual power attacks. Alternatively, you can use a mace and sword for slower dual power attacks but much deadlier ones. The bulk of the Orc Noble's playstyle, however, will come in the form of mace and shield. With this combo, you can deal damage with your mace when necessary, bash nearby foes to bring their guard down, or even charge if you have a clear path through multiple foes. One other thing to take into account as you are a well-raised young orc is that you can talk your way out of violence more often than not, intimidating or persuading those who wish to do you harm. Outside of combat, barter is a strong suit, as well as the humble art of blacksmithing. When dealing with high-ranking officers and jarls, the Orc Noble will be right at home. As for gear, the Orc Noble will wear a full set of dragon scale armor, excluding the helmet. This looks even better with dragon aspect over the top. Be sure to smith this up to its max potential, then wear the nicest jewelry you can find befitting of your status, preferably enchanted with Fortify one-handed or block if you're lucky enough to loot it. The weapons to craft and smith up include a glass sword, a glass dagger, an ebony mace, and also we have a glass shield. A little side note, for role-playing purposes, you may want to also carry around a nice set of robes or garments that suit someone of such high political standing. And there you have it, guys. Subscribe to FudgeMuppet if you're new to the channel and want more, and give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Don't forget that timestamps can be found in the description below for all of your video navigation needs, along with all of the links to our social media accounts. Thank you guys so much for watching as always. I'm Michael, and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.